Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing, the Monday edition. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications with SBAM. Yes, thank you for being here today. I do want to give a quick thank you to our sponsor, Marana Group. They are a data, document, and distribution company in Kalamazoo.
All right, wanted to start out just by acknowledging what has just happened up in Gaylord and Otsego County, and the tornado coming through in the way that disrupts so many people's lives. Obviously, people hurt and a few that lost their lives, and a lot of livelihoods that are in jeopardy right now too, with so many local entrepreneurs. And so, just wanted to acknowledge that and well wishes and best wishes for a community that recovers. I know this community pretty well. It's really tough, and people that know how to take care of their neighbors. And so I know that they're going to be okay, but it's a long road. A few years ago, I guess it was 7 years ago now, a tornado went through my community in Portland, and thankfully nobody lost their lives during that, but it really did go right through the business district and take out a lot of businesses. It took years for the look of the community to be totally restored, but it brought out the best in the community. So I know that the United Way there in Otsego County is really active in doing some great work. The local Chamber of Commerce as well. But this would be a great time as soon as those local businesses are back up and running to go way out of your way to patronize them, to buy local, keep it local, and support those who really need that type of help. Well, we have a special we have a very special program today because we have some guests that are joining us from the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, LARA. I kind of like that as one of the things, each new governor can like change all the names of the department, and this is one that changed when I was in office, and the new managers kept the name. So we used to call it LARA for short, but we have Orlene Hawks, who's the director of the department, and also Emily Laidlaw, who heads up the child care division within that department. And so, Orlene, I wanted to turn it over to you first. A really big announcement last week that we just briefly touched on last week as kind of a preview that you are coming on the program. So just wanted to see if you could maybe thank you for being on the program, but also maybe just an overview of what's happening with this new rollout, the major pieces of it, and why it should matter to small business owners. And you're on mute.
I just took care of that. Well, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. And in terms of LARA, you know what they say, if it ain't broke, right, don't try to fix it. So we love the name. It's very fitting, and we've been having a great time with all the work that's done within the department. So first of all, let me just thank you for this opportunity. Thanks, Sarah, as well, for this invitation. We really appreciate your interest and your partnership in supporting the expansion of childcare across Michigan. And we're very excited to be in front of you today to talk about all the exciting work that we're doing for the Caring for My Future. I think everyone here would agree that quality childcare programs are the silent drivers of our economy. And that's because without safe, reliable, affordable childcare, many parents, especially women, wouldn't be able to work to support their families, realize their dreams, maximize their potential, and help drive our post-pandemic recovery. Nearly half of all Michigan families live in a community without enough childcare. This real implication for families is something that we take very seriously. Women have had to leave the workforce. Families have had to make really strong, important decisions, hard decisions. And it's had a real implication as well, real implications for small business owners and executives who need a diverse and reliable workforce to support your businesses. A week ago today, as you said, Brian, I had the honor and the privilege of joining the Lieutenant Governor, Governor L.G. Gilchrist, and State Superintendent Dr. Rice to announce the details of an unprecedented 100 million. It still boggles my mind, just the investment and the commitment that we're putting towards really making an investment to significantly increase access to childcare. We announced that the state of Michigan is committing to open 1,000 childcare sites, new childcare sites over the next 2 years, while supporting childcare professionals who are already operating. The $100 million investment will expand access to quality, affordable childcare across the state, focusing on what entrepreneurs need most. And we've heard you. The things that we are focused on that will be included in our plan is supporting childcare entrepreneurs by helping them find and create a safe space and place to open their business, supporting entrepreneurs' dreams with startup funding that helps them to get up and running, investing in current and future childcare educators through grants that support their learning and growth. And finally, ensuring these new small business owners have the resources and knowledge they need to stay in business. So it's not just a matter for us to get them in and get them open, but we want to be there and we want to support you to stay in business as well. As I mentioned before, childcare is a solid economic driver. Every driver needs a map to make it to their destination, and the Child Care Licensing Bureau provides that roadmap to childcare licensing. We will connect on-the-ground navigators familiar with the best practices in the industry with interested entrepreneurs to inform and assist them in starting their own childcare business. We will also provide resources such as easy-to-use toolkits that will cover business operations and trainings. We kind of call that the Licensing 101, where we help entrepreneurs to navigate licensure more efficiently. And I think that's another important key is not only, talking and doing these opportunities to get this awareness out, but also giving you something tangible that you can use, something that you can refer back to. But we still understand that opening childcare sites is only part of the solution. And we know childcare was hit especially hard given the impact of the pandemic. During the past 2.5 years, the state has lost 9,000 childcare staff members. That's 9,000 people who have left the industry and created an insurmountable roadblock for parents trying to return to a normal work life, and has impacted the labor pool that every employer, especially small businesses, rely on. We've seen and continue to see businesses limit their hours, their services, and sadly, close. They've had to close their doors to a lack of childcare options that parents need most. That includes childcare options outside of the regular 8 to 5 business model and in less densely populated communities. So for the past year, LARA has been working to address childcare vacancies. You see Emily Laidlaw, I'll introduce her in a little bit, but she has been instrumental in creating a bureau to really address these issues. And part of that is addressing the vacancies that exist, and by meeting people interested in providing care to children wherever they are in their career and family life. This investment will allow childcare entrepreneurs and educators to gain in the field work experience by working at or starting their own childcare business and simultaneously enrolling in a tuition-free post-secondary program, such as Michigan Reconnect or the Teach Scholarship. We know this will help drive the economy. We know most of our childcare providers are women. And at LARA, we are in such a unique position to support women entrepreneurs who support parents working in other industries. Today, there are plenty of opportunities. And again, I thank you, Brian and Sarah, for inviting us to come before you to talk about these important issues and the opportunities for childcare entrepreneurs to grow their business. For any childcare entrepreneur who has dreamed of starting their own business, now is the time to start that journey. And LARA is here. We've got information that we can distribute to you. We've got the resources to help you to grow your business, to stay in business. And with that, I know that we're on limited time. So I'll yield the rest of my time and turn it over to LARA's Child Care Licensing Bureau Director, Emily Laidlaw, who will provide you with more details.
Thank you so much, Director. Thank you for having me here. So I wanted to go into a little bit of detail on the 4 buckets that we've divided the Caring for My Future Fund into. That's space, startup funding, staff, and business support. We heard from childcare entrepreneurs across the state that these were the biggest blockages from them expanding their business or starting a business. Space, we will create the Child Care Facility Fund, and that will allow new and expanding sites to become eligible to renovate or upgrade facilities. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was presenting in Detroit, I heard from providers who could not only not find space, but they were blind to the amount of renovation that would need to occur before they were able to accept kids. Combining these 2 pieces will allow entrepreneurs to see what they need to do in order to create a safe and quality space for kids. Under startup funding, I've also heard from a pair of sisters in Midland who wanted desperately to start their own childcare business. However, the reimbursements that the state was giving right now weren't going to help them with the capital that they needed to start their own business. So we're looking at 2 funding streams here. One would be for pre-licensure that would help defer the cost of becoming a licensed childcare and starting your own business. And then a reimbursement for after a business becomes licensed to mimic what we're giving out right now, which is the Child Care Stabilization Grants. Third is Director Hawks mentioned that there's 9,000 staff vacancies. So we have a 3-pronged approach here to strengthen the childcare career pathway with Reconnect and Teach scholarships, expand our apprenticeship programs, and remove regulatory barriers to meet staff where they are and enroll them in these post-secondary experiences or allow them the on-the-ground experience within the small business of childcare to move forward on their career in caring for kids. Finally, we have a very large bucket labeled business, and that's where LARA's one-stop shop lives. The director talked a bit about our one-stop shop, which will really be the hub of Caring for My Future. It will streamline the licensing process and also connect childcare providers and potential providers to all of these other elements that I've mentioned, so that navigating the large system isn't so confusing for someone starting a small business. We also have other supports under this bucket for family childcare networks. Those are the micro businesses of our childcare world that need support and mentoring and collaboration. So we'll be creating that. While it's not required, it will be a nice place for people to come together and share thoughts of how to sustain a family business. Also business sustainability planning, some of that business 101 that you get here at SBAM, we'll be working on creating as well. So with that, I'll take any questions or.
Great. Well, thank you so much both for coming on, and thanks for representing so well. One of the things that we always look for is to look to the private sector for solutions, and that's why we were so pleased to see that this really is small business centric. This set of proposals to really to help with overall the workforce shortages, low labor force participation rates that we're seeing today, and this is one component of that. And but to take an approach that really hits on the feedback you got from providers. And I happen to know, because we have a lot of great members that are child care providers and also a partner association, that the engagement in putting this together was with the private sector child care providers was really strong. And so for that, I really appreciate your willingness to come on and share. We will continue to share this information out there and working with the segments of our members, I think that are most directly impacted by this and would have the opportunity to either update and build facilities, get them ready for kids, finding the staff, and then ultimately supporting the workforce. Thank you both for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Well, Sarah, we have we've got several other things that we want to talk about. Although I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Snyder Alumni Club is really pretty awesome, and Orlene Hawks did some really important work in the Snyder administration toward the tail end of it, and then continued right on to the next administration. Has done a great job in licensing regulatory affairs. This idea of like a one-stop shop has been something that we have really been pushing for a few years to try and get kind of embedded into the system. And while in this case it's just for child care providers that have to deal with a whole range of different possible aspects or divisions within the department, that type of a model where you wouldn't expect the small business owner to be an expert at the maze of government, but instead you got one door to go through, and then it's their job to make sure that you get to the right place behind the curtain. It's a great concept. I hope they pull it off. I mean, it's something that's been talked about for a long time, but never really, they hadn't made it happen. And in this case, they're going to try and make it happen with childcare.
Yes, absolutely. Anything to make it easier on the small business owner is always a huge plus. So I want to revisit a couple of stories that we covered last Thursday. The first was the action happening in the legislature around taxes. Is there an update since we last talked?
So what happened last week was that the legislature was passing a tax plan in anticipation of a revenue estimating conference the next day that would show billions of additional dollars in revenue into the state. So, as you might imagine, the state is kind of in a circumstance where the things that are making people's lives generally difficult, things like rising costs, actually increase revenue to state government. So take sales tax, for example. Everything costs more, so the 6% that goes to the state for sales tax ends up going up as well. And so the state government keeps on seeing more and more revenue increases in their revenue estimating conferences. And on Friday, the House Fiscal Agency, the Senate Fiscal Agency, and the Treasury Department all came together on a consensus estimate of, for the rest of this year and next year, how much additional revenue over and above the extraordinary high amount of revenue they already estimated. And it was $6 billion more. So $6 billion more between the general fund and the school aid fund. So the anticipation of that news is really what prompted the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans to try and coalesce around permanent tax relief, to say, look, this tax revenue has gone up so much over the last few years. Some of it's one time, but a lot of it sticks, that it's just a new base, and this is where it's going to be in the future. And so reducing the income tax rate from 4.25 down to 4% is one of the components, and then increasing the earned income tax credit, which supports lower income working individuals. So people who have jobs but are at low income, to provide an additional reward or incentive for that work. Both of those things are things that SBAM has long supported. So the idea of the income tax rate, the individual income tax rate, is the main business tax that most small businesses pay. So to ratchet that down at a time when revenues are at record levels makes a lot of sense. But then also to provide workers an earned income tax credit, to increase that as a reward for working, as opposed to like the unemployment system last year and the year before, which was more of a disincentive to work. This is the exact opposite. One of the reasons why we've supported it. There's some other components to that tax plan as well, but those are the two that we were most interested in. House passed it, Senate passed it. It's on its way to the governor. The governor has indicated that she will probably veto it, although we would love to change her mind on that. It's about $2.6 billion in total tax cuts. Remember, the revenue estimating conference was a $6 billion windfall. That's on top of the other times when it was up $5 to $10 billion over previous years. So really, this is the time for it. So we do have a call to action out there right now. If you have not submitted it yet, we make it really easy for you to shoot an email off to the governor's office and ask her, please don't veto this, sign this legislation, giving our small business owners a bit of a break, and then also rewarding those individuals who are in the workforce today.
I just dropped the link to our call to action in the chat here on Zoom, and I'm sure it will be on Facebook as well. So thank you in advance for taking, I don't know, 90 seconds of your day to do that. All right, the Business Leaders for Michigan just published their annual report, Compete to Win, Michigan's Path to Top 10. Any surprising or interesting takeaways?
Yeah, so I thought what I would do, I just grabbed a couple of screens, if you will, from their report that I wanted to share, and on that, I've got the first is just the top 10 states. So the Business Leaders for Michigan have their own kind of index or looking at, what makes a top 10 state. And on this first slide, it shows where the current top 10 states are. And they look at things like labor force participation rate, educational attainment. As you can see, kind of where we stand on the list here, and as compared to the other 50 states. But, as you notice, is kind of interesting, is right along the border, on the West Coast, all the way down, a lot of these states that kind of are gathered together on the outside, and none in the middle, and certainly none in the Midwest that hit that top 10 status. So these are, according to their index, the ones that are the top 10. Interestingly, when we look at we have a separate index, we look at the entrepreneurial economy, and there's some pretty decent overlap on top entrepreneurial states as well. But if you look at areas like our median household income, 35th in the country, but in terms of our growth rate, 40th in the country. So you would interpret this at 35th and then maybe declining, and GDP per capita, the overall size of the economy, again, bottom half. A few where we stand a little bit better, business climate perception, that's based on surveys that they do. So Business Leaders for Michigan are bigger companies. So this would be the perspective of bigger companies when it comes to that perception, as opposed to entrepreneurs. But net business creation at 20th in the country, and we've talked a lot about that, but a lot of new business starts here and across the country. Now, what would it mean to be a top 10 state? I found this particularly insightful, that if we were like one of those 10 states, that would mean that annual household income would be about almost $12,000 more than it is in Michigan today, and it would mean that 4,200 more companies would be started each year. But here's the big one. Look at this one: 350,000 more workers in the workforce. So if our labor force participation rate and population trends were like those of a top 10 state, there would be 350,000 more people in the workforce. And then here's another one down here that I thought was particularly striking. There'd be 60,000 more people moving to Michigan each year. It's about the size of the city of Royal Oak. So, in Michigan, we considered it kind of a win to stop losing population, but really to be a top 10 state, those are the types of states that people go to. And then on the education front, you'll see that we've got a lot of work to do here, and we've lost some ground. We talked about this in the Education Trust Midwest report last week, but this report also cited some statistics that are pretty tough. 39th and 4th grade reading, and that's after a lot of investment in 4th grade reading support over the last several years. 33rd in 8th grade math, and then bottom 10 in graduation rate. So also, you've heard me say before, when we're talking to public policymakers, that we are laser focused on the workforce and labor force participation, because there is no reason to believe, absent some heroic measures here, that it's going to get any better anytime soon. And just taking a look at the working age individuals, okay, so those that are 20 to 64. Now in Michigan, we've always relied more on older workers, so we have higher labor force participation rate historically over age 65. But that prime traditional working age population, 20 to 64, in the next 10 years, that will decline by 100,000 people. Even though our total population will go up, there's a typo with where the comma is here, it's 401,000. But so even though our population in this 10-year period is expected to go up somewhat, it's not expected, we have an older than average population, so it's not expected to go up with the population that would be in that prime working age category. That is expected to shrink over that same time period. So these labor force issues are particularly challenging. So if it seems strange that we spend our time on things like childcare as an example, this is really why, because we have to maximize the labor force participation in that working age category. And then the final slide for this is the labor force participation rate. And I just pulled this directly out of Business Leaders for Michigan's report, but this is public data from the feds, but it shows the US average, which is this blue line, and then the state, which is this purple line. And so you'll see at the beginning of the pandemic how both of them dropped down. Michigan dropped down more, and then kind of came back up, but then it's been kind of a bumpy ride. Ours is actually starting to increase a little bit, but still below 60%, 59.5%, as opposed to almost 62% for the US average. I would also point out, though, that over the long term, there has been, since the year 2000, this kind of overall decline. With the exception in Michigan, we're not doomed to an overall decline. Look at this around 2011, where it kind of bottomed out and then started climbing. I was trying to think of who was lieutenant governor during that time when it was climbing. I maybe Google it. But then but if you were to look at that, see, it was going up, not impressively so, but it stopped going down. The trend was kind of defying the national flat trend and going up a little bit. But then with the pandemic, it dropped. And that's what you're feeling today. It might not seem like a lot, but the idea of going from losing 2 to 3% of your overall labor force is very disruptive, because there's not a lot of extra labor sitting out there idle that are in and looking. So we've got to make sure that this is really, I think, the challenge of the next decade is how do we change our population trends in the first place, but then also how do we make sure that we have the most labor force participation that we possibly can, given the fact that we know our demographics are working against us.
All right, do we have a final Data Monday report as we close out the show?
Yeah, I'll go through really quickly in the Data Monday, although now I'm looking, oh, here we go. Too many options to pick from. So there's not a lot of new information here, but the trends look pretty similar to before. So here's the 4 regions of the country. You see that it looks like they're starting to slow down, flatten out at the top, which means maybe we're at the top of this kind of mini wave. Look at the heat map across the country. You'll see that it doesn't look like previous waves. So there's some areas of high transmission, but not like we've seen in the past. This, I think, is the best news of everything. This is nationwide. You see why you see the hospitalization numbers rise. The ICUs has stayed flat, so have deaths. So that's really a really good sign. And then when you look at Michigan, you'll see that there are 22 states now, or 22 counties that have high transmission according to the CDC. So those are the areas where they recommend masking. Not that anybody is doing that anymore, but just officially that's what they recommend for these 22 counties. But looking at the Michigan numbers, I didn't put the case counts up because they're almost irrelevant anymore the way that testing works. But if you look at hospitals, this I think is an apples to apples comparison of previous, because they basically test every inpatient. And you see ICUs in Michigan that stayed level this whole time, even though hospitalization numbers, total positives found in hospitals have gone up. But you can see clearly it's flattened out, and that 7-day average given at the daily case counts in hospitals is probably going to start coming down. So maybe a few signs that maybe we're at the kind of peak or the top of this kind of mini wave here, and then perhaps we'll get, as we get into the summer months, these are traditionally times when there are low points of any pandemic or now endemic activity out there in the landscape.
All right, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your day, and we hope to see you back here Thursday at 3 o'clock.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you on Thursday.